שפאולה כבר דיווחה פחות או יותר על פועלו הרב בענייני מיאלומה, חולים ובני משפחותיהם. אני רק רוצה לציין שמר אריק קיבל גם פרס הערכה ממלכת אנגליה על פועלו הרב למען חולי המיאלומה.
But I should just start by saying it's a great pleasure to be here. And a huge thank you to Varda and Paula and my friend Yaki for the invite to come over and give this presentation. We've been working closely with Amen for maybe 5 or 6 years, and both our organizations have grown and developed together. And I think Paula especially deserves a lot of credit for the amazing work that she's done here in Israel, and we've certainly learned a lot from the work that's been done over here, so congratulations. I work for an organization called MYELOMA UK, and we've been operational since 1997. In fact, the title of my talk was to talk about the important role that patient organizations play. And looking towards the future, that role will probably become much more important than it has been in the last few decades. So MYELOMA UK are a very similar organization to Amen. We're essentially a patient organization. We're a little larger, potentially. Our income is around £3.5 million, and we have around 35 staff, which equates to about 28 full-time equivalent staff. We have quite a unique business model. It's very different to any other myeloma organization, probably anywhere in the world, in so much as we take myeloma from patients over here all the way back to the laboratory in science, and then all the way back to patients in a complete model. So what that means is that we understand the unmet need that you have, whether it be for better treatments, safer treatments, better quality of life, better nursing skills, better doctor skills. We work out what you need, and then we design the plan to make sure we can deliver that in the future. So there are 3 areas that I specifically wanted to focus on by way of showing how important it is for patient organizations to be active and to work with all stakeholders that would be involved in your treatment and care. So that includes researchers, payers, government officials, the pharmaceutical industry, doctors and nurses. There's a lot of people that we need to influence and work with so that when you go to hospital, you and your families get the best possible treatment and care. And this morning, we've heard a lot about new treatments, but new treatments are unfortunately very, very expensive. And it's sometimes very difficult for clinicians and doctors on their own to persuade the payers that they should be, that the drug should go in the basket. And I think patient advocacy plays a huge role and will play an even more important role in the future in making sure that patients can access new treatments as quickly as possible in the clinic. So in the UK, we've worked very hard over the last 15 years to make sure that every single new treatment in myeloma has been approved and made available in the clinic. And that's exactly what you have done here in Israel. We heard from Yaki and Paula this morning that you are very much at the cutting edge of treatment anywhere in the world. But that simply would not have been possible without the efforts of Amen and without all of your efforts working hard with the payers, the government and the pharmaceutical industry to make sure these drugs are available in your basket. So there are people with myeloma alive today in Israel because of the work of Amen, and that is really phenomenal. So that really underlines the importance of patient organizations. Another really critical area is in the provision of information and support. Being diagnosed with myeloma, I can only imagine, is quite a terrifying experience for patients and their families, at least most patients and their families. And it's often that diagnosis is given in a very stressful and very hurried and very difficult hospital environment. And it's often not the best place to decipher or understand all of the information that your doctor or nurse has told you. So when I think about it from a patient perspective, what the doctor says to the patient is, Mr. Smith, you've been diagnosed with myeloma, and myeloma is a cancer of plasma cells, and it does this. Most often the patient hears, Mr. Smith, you've been diagnosed with cancer, and he or she hears nothing else after that. And because myeloma is very complex, we've heard that from the doctors today, no two patients are the same. It's a complex cancer, it relapses, it comes back. There's a variety of different treatment options. And most patients and families would benefit from having access to information. So that's another really important thing that patient organizations do, is to provide practical support, a listening ear, emotional support, advocacy and information to help you cope with everything, and your families cope with everything a diagnosis of myeloma brings. So it's another really, really important role that patient organizations play, and we know that AMEN do that very well. And we're all here today because we're learning new things about myeloma, so we can all go back and hopefully cope a little better, have a little bit more hope than we had yesterday. And these things would simply not happen without the role of patient organizations. And the third thing, and this is probably for me the most important thing for the future, is what we can do to help facilitate and accelerate the research that will deliver new and safer treatments into the clinic where you will benefit. And around the world, we spend a lot of money, and we have a lot of institutions and a lot of doctors and a lot of people working in labs in white coats doing great things for myeloma. But there is no business plan that underpins that research. There's no blueprint. There's a lack of collaboration. For the most part, these researchers are thinking and working in isolation and are taking up crucial resources and crucial time that we don't have, not speaking to each other and not using the resources as efficiently as they could, and not collaborating and sharing data and coming together. And it's very difficult for them to change that model, because what would be the incentive and the rewards for them to do that? Because their incentives and their rewards are often very different from ours. And therefore, sometimes patient organizations can be the honest brokers, and the organizations that can bring researchers and clinicians together in one room and align all of these agendas to a more common goal, which is patient benefit. And that's a really critical role for patient organizations, is trying to get all the different stakeholders that have their own agendas, their own incentives, their own vested interests, and are working and thinking in isolation round the table so that they can do better things more quickly to benefit patients. We also can be very useful in providing research funding and directing research funding to the best possible research projects. And again, an evolving role of patient organizations and medical and organizations that also fund research is to bring doctors together and say, you know what, this working in isolation is not so good for patients. Why don't we sit round the table, as Donna does in Canada once a year, with all the great minds and say, what are the priorities? What do we need to deliver? We can't do everything, and we only have X amount of money, time, and expertise. But outside this room, we've got thousands of patients that depend on us being successful. So why don't we collaborate? Why don't we prioritize? Why don't we break it up and say, okay, you do this bit, and you do that bit, and we do this bit, and come together so we can progress and accelerate better treatments for patients more quickly and efficiently, and hopefully more cheaply than we have done in the past. So I think these are three very, very important things that patient organizations do. And I would argue in the next decade and the decades beyond that, we will be the most important stakeholders in the progress and acceleration of research and new treatments in myeloma. But the really tough thing about all of this is it comes down to advocacy. It comes down to the willingness of patients to participate in research. And having spent some time with doctors over the last 24 hours, I think the doctors here seem to be very special. They're very close to patients, very connected to patients. That's not the same in the UK when it comes to research. It's almost like, what can you do for doctors in research, not what they can do for you. And I think patients don't get enough credit for their participation in research. If patients 10 years ago and 20 years ago didn't take part in research, we would not have the treatments that we have today. So patients play such an important role in progressing and accelerating research. But unfortunately, all of that needs to be paid for as well. So we raise £3.5 million a year. 90% of that income comes from people like you. It comes from patients. Our organization is supported almost entirely from patient and family donations and fundraising. And that is really spectacular. That's a heck of an achievement, that over and above all the challenges and issues that you have in dealing with myeloma and the financial pressures that it puts on you, you still support your organization, whether it be Myeloma UK or Amen. And what's really special about that money is what it can leverage. It's a relatively small amount of money in comparison to spending $1 billion to bring a new drug to market. But what that small amount of money does is transformational. It will make sure that we get the behaviors right in pharmaceutical companies, that we get doctors working together, that we prioritize research, and we build environments where we can accelerate the development of new drugs more efficiently and quicker so patients can benefit. So I guess in summary, I would just emphasize the real importance of what all of you do here in Israel and what I and my colleagues do in the UK. I think it's probably the most important, the most transformational bit of work that's been done in the last decade and will be done in the decades to come. So keep up the good work, be courageous, be brave. You're part of a phenomenal organization that's up there with the best groups in the world. And we very much look forward to continuing our very fruitful and productive collaborations. Thank you.